We're learning Sicha Beis of Parshas Teitze in Chelek Yutes on page 208. Wegen der Mitzvah von Make sagt der Posuk. The mitzvah in this week's Parsha regarding building a fence on top of a roof of a house. The Posuk says as follows. Aleph. Kisivne bayis chodesh vasisa make legagecha. When you build a house, a new house, you should make a fence for your rooftop. Isn't it move on? So the question here in this pasuk is as follows. Pavashteit bayis chodesh. Why does it say that it's a new house? Der din is doch. The halacha is, as mizmechuyev b'make nitna v'meboit a naya hois. You're obligated to place a fence on your rooftop not only when you build a new house. Nareich v'mekauft an alta hois. Even if you buy an old house on a make that did not have a fence, you have to put up one. Or in any other situation where you have a house that doesn't have a fence on it, you have to place the fence on top of the roof. So why does the pasuk say bayis chodesh? In Sefri state mishas chodeshosai asele make, that you should build this fence from the time that the house is new, which means as the chiyuv zu machen a make wird nicht erst noch reinkleiben sich in den Bayis, also wie mezuzah, the obligation to build a fence is not only after you actually move into the house, like the halach is regarding mezuzah. You don't have to put up a mezuzah on the house until you actually move in and are living there. Nor gleich, when the Bayis wird aufgebaut. The mitzvah of Makkah is as soon as you finish building the house. Mishas chadashosei. When it's a new house, before even you're living there. That's the meaning, according to the Mechilte, or Sefri rather, why it says Chodosh in the Pasuk. The Lashon HaKosov is aber noch haltzend glattik. But there's still something that's not understood here in the expression of the Pasuk when it says Bayis Chodosh, a new house. Wie bald der Reiftu von Sefri is, as the Chiyuv von Makkah kommt bald, wenn wir werden die Beilung von Stub, since, as the Sefri explains, the Pasuk is coming to tell you that you're obligated to put the fence there. As soon as you become the owner of the house, whether you just built the house, whether you just bought the house, and you're not even living in it yet, noch fahren sich hereinkleiben sich in ihr. Was is the Teire meramis, dem din an allem make, durch ein Loschen sivne bayis chodosh. So why does the Teire hint to this halacha by writing that it's a new house? From welches is mashma, as the chiyuv make is nor by a bayis chodosh. The simple meaning of those words is that the mitzvah is limited to be only in a new house that you just built. Und nicht durch Chaloschen, was madgish sein, als der Chiyuv Make ist Chal auf jeden Bayis, gleich wie der Bayis kommt in seine Schuss. Why doesn't the Pasuk use a clearer language to tell you that the mitzvah of Make applies to every house? Elamai, when, at what point, not when you move in, but as soon as the house becomes yours. So Bayis Chodosh literally means a new house. But that's not the case though. It's only when the pasuk says Chodosh, according to the Sefri, it's coming to tell you the time of the mitzvah, that you should fulfill it as soon as the house becomes yours. So the question still remains in the exact words the pasuk uses, Bayis Chodosh. Why does it say those words? That the mitzvah applies only to a new house. Beis, then there's another pasuk here on this mitzvah. Weiter in pasuk steht the tam of Asiyas Makkah. Afterwards, the Torah says the reason for this mitzvah, ki yipoel hanoifel mimeno, because someone may fall from the rooftop if you don't place a fence there. Is nit verstandig. So in this pasuk as well, there's a question. The pasuk warnt doch da kegen fahr den Nefila. The pasuk is saying put a fence there in order to prevent that someone should not fall. So no one fell yet. Heint wie ruft him the pasuk shoin on yipoel hanoifel. So how does the pasuk refer to this individual as the one that falls will fall? He didn't fall yet, so how could we refer to him as the one that fell? The Gemara the Gemara addresses this question, and the Gemara says, this is an individual that was deserving to fall from Sheishis Yimei Bereishis. It's been predestined that this person will fall. The fact that he's going to fall off the roof of your house, that's because someone that has chusim, he's going to be the person that a chus will happen in his residence, on his house, and a person that is a chayva, he'll be someone that his house will cause something terrible like this to happen, that a person will fall from his house. So that's the reason why it says, Yipoel hanoifel. that this person is already destined to fall. He's someone that's a chayiv from before. Aber der Emphe bringt Rashi b'pirusha ala Teire. This answer, Rashi also quotes it here in the Chumash. Weil derech limud apshat b'pshuta shom mikra is der teretz l'chayre nit glatik. Learning the pasuk, simply reading the words in pshuta shom mikra, when it says yipol ha-neifel, it's still not smoothly understood. Neifel is pirusha nit as roi zelipol. The translation of neifel is not someone that didn't fall yet, he's just deserving to fall. Nor lashon hoive v'shem atoya. It's speaking about the present and it's giving him a title of who he is. Neifel mamish. He's a person that fell. He has the title of a neifel. So if so, how can we say literally that this person is a neifel if he didn't fall yet? And a chanami is deserving to fall, but he didn't fall yet. So what's the term of neifel in the pasuk? So those are the two questions that the Rebbe is going to focus on here in the Sikha. The term Chodosh, Bayis Chodosh, in the first pasuk on this inyan, and then the term Neifel that it says afterwards and the reason for this mitzvah. Steht in Pirkei der Rebbe Lazar. So before the Rebbe answers, the Rebbe gives the following introduction. It says in Pirkei der Rebbe Lazar, as the Tam was der Rebbe start baschaffen the Welt in Aneufen, as the Ruach Tzfeines is nit verendigt geworden, the Rebbe creates the world, that the northern side of the world is unfinished. Kemaimer, as the Gemara says, Olam lach sadre hudaime. The world is compared to a porch or a patio that has an enclosure from three sides, and v'ruach tzfeinis eine mesuveves. And one side, the northern side, is not enclosed; it's open. So the world as well is created with an opening on the northern side. Is valtame vet kumen eine und sagen hu eleka. If someone will come along and say and claim to say that he is God, that man him empferen, so we will answer him, so if so, let him come and finish off this corner of the world that the Eibishter left unfinished. So that's what the Gemara explains to us. The world is created in such a way that there are things in the world that are unfinished. So from this, the Rebbe takes a more broader message. Das heißt, what this means is as follows. Kidei as the Nivroim sollen the Toppen kein Toas und meinen, as they darfen it ankommen zum Beir Eilum Manhigai. That nobody should make a mistake and think that he doesn't have to rely on the creator of the world. Everything in the world is perfect in the world itself, and we don't need any higher force to rely on. To das was is hechef to rely on a force, on a power that's higher than him. The Eibishter creates the world itself in such a way as that the Metzias of the world itself has something lacking in it. And you can see that this is something that the world itself cannot fill in this lack. And therefore the people in the world itself can sense that they always have to rely on a higher koyach that's above them. So that's something within the very nature of the world itself. The world itself is created in such a way that there's certain areas that it's lacking in. And therefore you always feel like there's a higher force that you have to connect to. And the Rebbe now will explain, the Gemara speaks about the Ruach Tzfeinis of the world. Whatever the Pshat in the Gemara is, Begashmius, Beruchnius, but the Rebbe will apply this to the world of Seichel. That there as well we see that it's something that it's incomplete. There's something lacking here that a person senses that he has to rely on something that's higher than Seichel. The same also applies regarding the existence of Seichel. Kidei as a mensch, a Bal Seichel. A human being that has his brain, he can think, soll sich nicht einreden, should not convince himself, mit sein Seichel kann alles verstehen. With my mind I can come to everything. I can figure everything out. Everything in my mind is endless. The power of the mind is endless. So a person shouldn't come to such a conclusion. Hat der Eibishter in Imad Bia given. The Eibishter put it as part of the nature of Seichel itself, as muss ankommen zu Hechel von Seichel. That in order for Seichel, for intellect to function, it always relies on what's above Seichel. What does this mean? So the Rebbe says, for example, as follows. Zu verstehen as Seichel, muss man früher Teufel sein, du Miskalos Rishonis und Klali Chachma. In order to have any idea, any concept, you have to have certain foundations that the concept relies upon. Was leut die Klolim, kommt man zu dem Maskanes HaSeichel v'Asvara, and only based on those foundations can you come to the conclusion that you have with the Seichel. Aber die Klolim Gufe sind nicht muchrach mit Zad HaSeichel. And those things that you base your seichel on are not things that are proven facts. They're ideas that are completely higher than seichel. So this is a concept that the Rebbe brings in a few places when you get to the chokhmah that exists in the world. The Rebbe quotes in other places the lashon of Chazal, Yesh chokhmah b'goyim tamen. The wisdom that exists in the world is there. There's tremendous wisdom in the world. But nevertheless, every dvar chokhmah has certain basic foundations that it's based upon. There are certain things that you have to accept without having it proven, and then you could go from there and create a dvar seichel. You have the definitions of certain things. You have certain axioms that you have to base the dvar seichel on. And those are unproven rules. Azay the Metzias, and then from there you can come to create, whether it's in math and any other area, in engineering, and all the divrei chachma that exists in the world, they're all based on certain hanachas, on certain things that you accept, even though they're unproven facts, and then from there you can come to the dvar seichel. So what do we see? That even in seichel gufa das heißt, in seichel gufa herzachon, wie is a chaser, muss ankommen zu l'maylam an a seichel. The world of Seichel itself recognizes that in order for it to function, it has to rely on certain unproven facts that are above Seichel. Seichel itself is not b'shleimus. So just like this is true regarding the world in Bechlal and regarding the prat of Seichel in the world, the same is true lahavdol regarding Teitze. Nigle de Teitze is arabgekommen beslapshus, bis in avonas et tfisa Seichel anushi. The Eibusha gave us the revealed part of Teitze in a way that it comes down, that a person with his simple human understanding could relate, and even a guy, biza filan eini Yehudi, a guy could even understand the concepts of Teitze. Und kedei amazol gedenken, as Teitze, oich nigle de Teitze. So in order for us to remember that every part of Teitze, even nigle of Teitze, is seichel eleki, is really a godly intellect. Hat der Eibusha ausgestellt gewisse Inyanim von nigle de Teitze, and as oifen, so the Eibusha gives us the revealed part of Teitze in such a way as muzol ze nit kenne verstehen le tachlisam, that it should be impossible to fully understand them. Seiden wenn man lernt die inyanim wie sie werden es bei in pnimius Teitze was es seichel eleki begoli. You'll only understand them if you'll use and bring the interpretation that there is in the deeper dimension of Teitze. In pnimius Teitze, we're there. That's the part of Teitze where you openly see that this is godliness, that this is the Eibishter Seichel, not your Seichel. And when you include and bring in that dimension of Teitze, then you'll be able to understand this Parat in Teitze. So there's gewiss inyanim. There are certain inyanim in Teitze that the Eibishter Kaviyachal left unfinished. It's not possible for us to comprehend what this subject or this word in Teitze is saying unless you bring from a higher level in Teitze where it's elikus. Und durch dem benennt man, as Teitze hat sich nar angetan in Seichel anushi. And through this, we could come to realize that the fact that we could learn Teitze and understand Teitze is not because Teitze is a human Seichel chas v'shalom, but that Teitze was given with the ability that we could understand it in Seichel, that it comes down and it comes to the level of Seichel. Aber b'mehusa, is he Seichel eleki shel hamaylam v'nevraim? In its essence, what is Teitze? Teitze is a godly intellect, totally removed of the existence of the human mind. So in order for us to sense this, there are certain inyanim in Teitze that are, so to speak, unfinished, that you have to rely on a deeper pirish of Teitze, where it's mamish begoli elokos, to interpret what this means. So now we come back to our psukim here. As eine von den inyanim anal is euch der pasuk wegen mitzvahs makeh. One of those areas in Teitze that are, so to speak, unfinished is this mitzvah of makeh here. Leuten bier pnimi von inyan makeh wird werden verstandig, as bayis chodosh is an inyan ikri in dem teichen pnimi von makeh. We'll understand why this term of chodosh is an integral point to this whole mitzvah of placing the makeh on the roof of the house. Dafke chodosh, der chiyuv von makeh is verbunden mit bayis chodosh. The obligation, this mitzvah is specifically connected to the concept of the house being a new house, as the Rebbe will explain according to Pnimius HaTeitze. Weil derich ze wird werden verstandig, der loschen yipul an neufel, as noch eider fällt herab von gagecha, is schön an neufel. And also, according to Pnimius HaTeitze, we'll understand the term of neufel in the literal sense, not only that he's deserving to fall, but he's actually a neufel. We'll be able to understand this also according to Pnimius HaTeitze. So what's the deeper understanding of this mitzvah? Chazal sagen, so it says in the Mishnah, right in the beginning of Masechta Yuma, Beisai zu ishtay. That the term Beisai that it says there on Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur doing is Aveda v'chiper ba'adoi va'ad Beisai. So the term Beisai refers to his wife. Bis wie Rabbi Yossi hat gesagt, as the Gemara there brings, that Rabbi Yossi said, Mi yomai lo karisi li ishti el li ishti beisi. I never refer to my wife as my wife, I always refer to her as the house. Since her whole work is to be the akeres habayis, to be the anchor of the home, so therefore, since that's her tachlis, that's her position in the world, so I always refer to her as bayis, as beisi. So that's the meaning of bayis. And therefore, in a deeper understanding of the pshat of our pasuk here, we could also refer to sivne bayis chadash, a person getting married to his wife. Und das ist der Pirish Pnimi in kisivne bayis chadash. The zman von ascholas chaye nesuin. It refers to the life of a person when he begins and he builds a new life in getting married. Wenn ein Mensch nimmt auf sich der achayim betzavore. And what changes when a person gets married? He leaves from a place where he was secluded from the world, where he had no responsibilities of having a house and paying bills and dealing with the physical world. He was removed of all of that. And now a person enters into married life where he takes upon himself, literally the expression that's used, a mill on top of his neck, where the person has to now handle and to carry with himself all of these things, which is the isaskos mit parnasa gashmis, where he is more occupied with providing for himself physically the livelihood in order to be able to live. Adam chayrish, adam zereya, to plant and to sow and so on, everything that has to be done in the field or any other work that has to be done in begashmias in the world. So that's what the pasuk Yisivne Bayis Chadash is referring to. A person building a new life, getting married to his wife. Zog Teitze, on this the Teitze says, Kisivne Bayis Chadash va'asisa make gaime. Vibalt ados is a Bayis Chadash. Over here, this is a new, completely new kind of Aveda. An naye seder Aveda in welchem is nicht eingeweint. This is a new stage in your life, a completely new kind of Aveda that you're not accustomed to. Before this, you didn't have to deal with the Gashmis of the world in this kind of a way. Now you're entering into a new phase, Chadash, a new place into the world. How do you deal with this? How does a person approach this new life, this new style of his life? Is by creating fences. As eine nit genug, diese Hirisen, was man gehaten, die Friede geifane Aveda. It won't be enough, all those different fences that a person made, that he was careful not to come to a place that a Yid is not supposed to be. Now that you have to enter into the Metzias of the world to a greater extent, so you have to actually build even more fences, more things that you're careful with in what you do and where you go. In machshave, in dibur und maisa. You have to have new fences where a person is careful with himself in his thought, speech, and action, since now he's interacting with the Gashmias of the world to a much greater extent. So the ability of the Gashmias of the world to draw him into it and to go away from the place where he's supposed to be is much more possible. So over here, in this new Aveda, Chadash, you have to make new Zehirisen. So in other words, the Chiddush here is, not only is it not a time for a person to leave down his guard and say, oh, now it's a new time, it's in a life of marriage, more related in the Gashmis of the world. And Adarabba, the fact that you're entering into this Gashmis of the world, it requires for a person to be more vigilant and to have more guards, to be sure that he should be able to do his Aveda in the Gashmis of the world the way it's required. The time for us, as far as by der Aveda Chadash di Bavara Nishma, and the reason why it's in this Aveda, entering into the married life, into the Gashmis of the world, that it requires new fences, is the pasuk Mamshech. So the pasuk says, Ki yipoil hanoiful mimeno, because if not, the person that falls, he's called a noifel, he may fall. So he's already referred to as a noifel in the present sense. Why? Hayais, as the Aveda is by mention verbunden mit der Tnuah von Yeride von Nefila. This is an Aveda where you're going down. You're going down and maybe even be falling down into a place that's very far from the source of where you were. Legabes and Friede Gematzev. Comparing to the place where you were before, when you were in your yeshiva, when you were in a place where you had no responsibilities and no connection to the world, you fall. You enter into a completely new phase of life, into the Gashmis of the world. Warum die Askas and Gashmias Elam is al derech v'klolis yiridas neshmas Elam hazeh. Just like the neshama, originally when it comes into the world, it leaves its place above and it comes down by Gashmias in the world. When a person gets married, it's like a new yiridas on neshama lamata, where the neshama is coming down below into the Gashmias of the world. So he is a neifel. That's the condition of the person when he gets married. He's coming down into the world. The Ribber is Alol as the Gashmi is Olam vetem oich arab nidrim von sein Madrege. And therefore it's possible that the Gashmis of the world will lower you down and cause you to fall into the Gashmis, to lose your mind, to lose Bechlal, your whole way of what you're supposed to be doing in this world in your Aveda. So if when he builds a new home, getting married, entering into this new phase of life, he won't be extra careful and build an additional fence, not only will he not be successful in utilizing that new interaction with Gashmias for the proper purpose, and to elevate it all to become Ruchnias, but the Gashmias wird noch vergrößern in seine Yeride v'nefila, yipoil hanaifel. The nefila that you had, which you are in, by coming into the Gashmias of the world, will be intensified and you'll fall even further. You'll fall down into the Gashmis of the world and even further. That's the expression of Yipol HaNeifel. So looking at this pasuk in a deeper sense, Beruchni is seeing what the pasuk applies to in the Aveda of a Yid in this world, specifically regarding Bayis Chodosh, regarding the time of marriage. We understand both the diak of Chodosh, it's a new phase in Aveda, and Neifel. It's also a phase where the person falls and enters into the Gashmis of the world, and therefore here, there's this bavaranish that you must build new fences and not to leave your guard down, adarabah, to create more guards for a person not to fall into the Gashmis of the world. Now the Rebbe takes this a step deeper. Bayis vert euch lefamim gemeint der Gufa Adam. Bayis sometimes could also be referring to the physical body of the person. When an Avedis Hashem, Nemtes Arum, the Aveda Klolis from Birurim. So therefore, in Avedis Hashem, this refers to the general Aveda of the Neshama entering into the body in this world to refine the body, the physical entity of the person. Zum Bevara sein dem Guf, so it's not only the physical body, but also the Chelek ba'olam. By extension, is the portion of the world that the Eibishter places you in. That's the bias that this pasuk is talking about, that a person is coming down into this world, into the bias, into his place of the world to elevate it. Und die Aveda wird angerufen Bayis Chodosh. And here as well, the pasuk says that this kind of Aveda, when the Neshama enters into the world, into a physical guf, into the Gashmis of the world, this is an Aveda that's new. It's a Chodosh, it's a new kind of Aveda. What does this mean? Why Chodosh? For two reasons. Weil, Aleph, number one, the Neshama, Kaidim Yiridasa Lamata, Hot Kein Musik mit Bazeh. The Neshama, before it comes down into this world, has no concept of what this reality of this world is about. The Neshama Lamaila knows of one thing, it's in the presence of a Lakos, it's with the Eibishter, it just knows of Bittel to the Eibishter. Doesn't understand, can't fathom the concept of what it means. It is a place of Gashmi, separated from the Eibishter. It's a completely new reality that the Neshama enters into. Totally new Aveda. That's one Pshat and Chodosh. On another point, Beis, in that Aveda, kum the emes chiddush. And then another point here is the Aveda that the Neshama does here lamata. This creates a tremendous chiddush, much more than what the Neshama accomplished above. Although it may seem that the Neshama above was serving the Eibishter on a much higher level, there the Neshama is connected. There the Neshama has no disturbances. It only knows of a lakus. Here the Neshama below comes into a place of Gashmias, very far from the source of where it is, but nevertheless, Chodosh. Dafki here below, there's an accomplishment of what the Neshama does that's greater, that's novel, be'ein haroich, infinitely greater than what the Neshama could accomplish above. And that's the point. The second point is what the Rebbe will focus on now. So first, let's explain this concept of Chodosh regarding the actual reality of Olam Hazeh. Olam Hazeh is considered to be a place which is Chodosh, a new place, infinitely far from the source where it is above. So this is connected to the idea that Chassidus speaks about regarding the very existence of the world. Before we come to the Aveda of a Yid, of what he accomplishes, the very creation of Olam Hazeh Agashmi is also considered to be a creation of a new reality, of a Chodosh, a Olam Chodosh. Although there are many different levels in Seder Ishtalshalos and the Ruchnisdige levels that evolve in the world's Lamaila, before you come to this physical world, was veren is have, bederech is chachus and zeh sheirische mokke. And in those Ruchnisdige worlds, their creation is also as a new existence that comes out of the source. In other words, the concept of Chodesh over here is something that's infinitely far from the source where it comes from. The idea of the opposite of Chodesh would be when something is just a revelation of the source, is that what exists in the source continues and extends and is revealed down to a lower level. But there's a direct link, there's a direct continuation from the source to the new world where it comes down to. So there's a hemshech here. That's one concept. But then you have Chodesh. The idea of Chodesh is what comes out from the source comes out in a way that it gets separated from the source. And Adarabah, it's created. It's created as a new world, as a new level that is infinitely far from the source. That's the idea of Chodesh here. So not only, that concept is true, not only b'negeh to Olam Hazeh Gashmi, that's true b'negeh to all of the levels, many levels of the worlds above, that there's the level in comparison to the level before, higher than it is Chodesh. It's new, completely new, unassociated. It's infinitely far from the source where it came from. And the Rabbi here brings a few examples for this, different levels that are mentioned in Chassidus. That Klal Ha'or Shel Achrei Tzimtzum is an inyan from Ischatshus, the whole existence of revelation, of godliness after Tzimtzum, in relation to the reality that existed before Tzimtzum, is a new world. There's no hemshech. The concept of Tzimtzum is that what was before is completely concealed. And after Tzimtzum, there's a new reality that's not a continuation of the Gili that began before. Chodesh, it's new. So over there's an union of Ischatshus. And the same thing also, Adam Kadmoin, wird angerufen Adam de Bria. Ak, which is the level of the world that exists, all included in one. In Ak, is also referred to as Adam de Bria, which is Yesh Ma'ayin. It's also a level of Yesh Ma'ayin. It's a new existence, a new reality that comes into being, unrelated to what was before. Kalim d'Atzilus, zenananim from Yesh Ma'ayin. The Kalim of Atzilus, the world of Atzilus, just like all other worlds, are comprised of Eiris and Kalim. Eiris are the Giluyim, the revelations, and Kalim is the levels of what contains the limitation aspect of the world of Atzilus, as much as you can use the terminology limitation regarding Atzilus. So Kalim of Atzilus that defines, as Chesed, as Gvura, the different levels that define this Metzias, is also Chodesh. It's new, and it's infinitely far from the source of where it comes from. And most definitely that this concept of Chodesh could be said regarding Olam HaBriya, the world of Briya that follows after Atzilus, is not a hemshech from the world of Atzilus. There's a separation between the world of Atzilus and Briya is Yesh Ma'ayin. It's a new reality that comes into being. So l'chayre, this concept of Chodesh exists within all of the Elamis, or many of the levels of the Elamis above in Seder Ishtalshelus. Von deswegen, however, is a mitius in Chiddush dafke in Ishavas in Olam Hazeh Gashmi. The true concept of Chiddush, that it's something totally new, with no continuation of a revelation from before, is dafke here regarding the physical entity of the world that was created. Ukemaimera Yedua, as the famous statement that said that as the Ishavas HaGashmi is mina ruchnius, ein lecha yesh ma'ayin gedolim mizeh. The creation of Gashmius, of this physical world, that came from Ruchnius, this is the true Yesh Ma'ayin. This is something that exists, that came from a place of nothingness. There's no continuation, no hemshech whatsoever, that the Ruchnius then comes down to the next level, until it develops into Gashmius. There's no such a thing. It doesn't develop into Gashmius. Gashmius is a totally new existence that the Eibishter creates, that is, Yesh Ma'ayin, without any hemshech to what existed before. And all of the other levels that the Rebbe spoke about, whether it's the Eiris Lachlerat Tzimtzum, the Ak, Kalim, and all those levels before, even though they are a hischatshos, but on some level there's an inyan of a hemshech. There's a certain gilui, there's a continuation in those levels to what was before, because they're all in the Olam Ruchniim. In the Olam Ruchniim, as distant and as far as one level may be from the other, and even if it's an infinite distance from the level above it, but nevertheless, the common denominator that it's all in the world of Ruchnius is epis vas of a hemshech from one level to the next. But when you come from Ruchnius to Gashmius, that's the level of Ein Areich, where it's infinitely disconnected from the level before. Here, the Eibishter creates a new reality that has no hemshech, no continuation to what was before. Here is a true chiddush. Here is the true ischatshus of Yesh Ma'ayin and Olam Hazeh Gashmi. So that's been a geya to the very creation of Olam Hazeh Gashmi. When al derech says, by the aveda mit dvarim gashmi. So the same is also true regarding the aveda that the neshama accomplishes dafke here in this physical world. Vibalt as Gashmias hot kein erech nit gabe ruchnius. Since the Gashmias of the world has absolutely no connection, no value, nothing, no continuation of the ruchnius. Kommt eis as die Aveda zum Bewahre sein Gashmias Olam. So the Aveda of the neshama that comes into the world to refine and reveal even in such a low place in this new reality here in the Gashmias of the world, machen von ruchnius, to discover even in the Gashmias itself, the godliness that there is here is an inyan von eschatshus. This is something which is something completely new. It's not something that you could discover and find in the Gashmias, the hemshech of what it had before, that there's a certain gili that continues that's here in the Gashmias. It's not a continuation at all. The Gashmias is a totally new existence, separated from any level of ruchnias. So the fact that we have the koyach to do an aveda, to take this yesh, and to elevate it and connect it to ruchnius above, this is bederech chiddush. This is something that a person is creating a new inyan, a new mitzias. So as it's brought over here, there's the Maramekaimis of the other sichis. One of them is in Chelek Yud Beis that we learned, that the Rabbi explains that just like there's the creation of yesh ma'ayin, that the Eibishter creates a new reality of a yesh, that it comes before the yesh there's an ayin, a world of ruchnius. And then from there comes the creation of a yesh, which is be'ein areich to the ruchnius. Al derech zeh, the aveda that a yid here below does to create a direh b'tachtainim, to reveal the presence of the Eibishter in the Gashmias, is taking the yesh and being megala the ayin. The yesh should become back ayin. That's also be'ein areich. That's an aveda that a person is taking something that has no connection, that you can't reveal in it. You can't reveal in it that aspect of ruchnius that it is, that's continuation from before. And you can take this yesh and be mahapechit and elevate it to take from the yesh and create an ayin out of it. That's the same like the chiddush of yesh ma'ayin when the Eibishter creates yesh ma'ayin. So that's the tremendous chiddush, that's the ischatshos of the aveda that we can do dafken olam hazeh. Und der Rebbe, so therefore, is derif in Aveda, merumiz and sivne bayis chodosh. That's the Aveda that's hinted in this lashon of bayis chodosh, referring to the Aveda in the Gashmias, in the guf of the person, in Chelka Ba'olam in Gashmias, that's called chodosh. Das is the Aveda zu eifton a chiddush in der bayis zeh guf. It's to create this novel idea, this tremendous chiddush, to take the guf and to reveal and to bring it, to connect to ayin. Und damit gufe beit men auf Abayis v'dirulei barach, and with this itself, you build a dwelling for the Eibishter here below in this world. That's the ikke chiddush of direh b'tachtainim in the lowest place, and the bayis, and the guf, and the chelek ba'olam, and the gashmias of the world. So that explains the concept of bayis chodesh on a much deeper level. It's not only, but the first pshat that Rebbe said was it's a new seder aveda. But if you hear the Rabbi saying the very Aveda itself, is the Chiddush. It's a tremendous Chiddush to be able to make a direh for the Eibishter, even in the Yesh Gufa, in a place which is not connected to anything before. The Yesh Gufa should become a direh for the Eibishter. That's the real Chiddush. Kishem vidar Aveda is b'derech eschatshos, azoy sesoich b'negeit dem adam oivit. So just like this is the Aveda itself, the Aveda is b'derech Chiddush, that you take the Yesh itself and create a direh for the Eibishter here. The same thing is also the effect of this on the person that does this Aveda. That Eloi, was tut sich in der Adam, the level, the elevation that it brings a person to when he does this kind of Aveda, durch andere erfahrene Aveda, or first the level that a person comes to, through the other Ifanim of Aveda, any other way of Aveda, that does not entail taking the Gashmius of the world itself and elevating it. And any other way that a person connects to the Eibishter is an ilui shebe'erech. It brings you to a level that is be'erech, that based on what you're doing, on the level that you're working on, you connect to one level of godliness, another level of revelation, and so on. It elevates the person according to that level that he connects to. Aber, durch der Aveda zum Bewahre sein Gashmi Seilam, when a person serves the Eibishter and he takes the lowest, the physical, that's completely disconnected, and that over there he brings the Eibishter, the result regarding the person himself is also that he gets elevated to a level that's completely infinitely above, higher than any level that he can reach to. Because the actual Aveda itself is a chiddush that he's creating in the Yesha of the Gashmias, so the effect on the person as well is that he gets elevated to this level that's infinitely far from any level that he could reach otherwise. Nachmer, even more so, the chiddush is not only regarding the person. The Aveda tutoy f'eich chiddush l'mayla kaviyachol. this brings about a chiddush even above by the Eibusher Kaviyachal. K'mayim Chazal, as we see the koyach that a yid has below, to Kaviyachal bring about an aliyah l'mayla, that akel b'dei shemayim chutz mi yiras shemayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven, besides yiras shemayim, that a person below has to work on himself. Al derech mayim Chazal, and also Chazal tell us, meisifin koyach b'gvura shel mayla, that a yid through his aveda below has the power to add power to the Eibishter's might above. So we see over here that there's this concept that a yid through his aveda adds kaviyachol to the levels above, which means durich der aveda zu machen adire lo yizbarach b'tachteinim, when we create a dwelling for the Eibishter dafke below in the physical world, vertas di dire no. So here you create a beautiful dwelling. Was is marchiv or marchivin daitay shel adam. This broadens, so to speak, daitay shel adam. Just like, this is the expression that's brought regarding a person. When a person has a dir noy, so it broadens his mind to be able to live in such a home. So the same thing also legabe the Eibishter, adam ha'elyon kaviyachol, when you create the dir b'tachteinim, so you kaviyachol broaden and elevate l'mayla to a level, to a chiddush, to a be'ein areich higher level, more than the levels are mitzad atzmam above. So in other words, what this is referring to is all the levels of Giluyim L'mayla, the various different levels in Seder Ishtalshalos and even above, all the levels of Giluyim cannot come to the level, to the Dira Loy, to the Dira, to the very essence of the Eibishter that's accomplished through the Aved in the Gashmis of the world. Dafka through the Aved in the Gashmis of the world is an aliyah higher than all of those levels of Giluyim that are hinted in the term Adam. Adam is the tzir of Adam L'mayla and the entire Seder Ishtalshalos, and through the Aveda of Dire B'Tachteinim, you elevate above the level of Adam to the very essence of the Eibishter. As the Rebbe explains here, Mitzad Seder Ishtalshalos is the Agbala Kaviyachal L'mayla B'Negeda Amshachas Eire L'Kiba Ilam. As far as Seder Ishtalshalos is concerned, so then there's a certain limitation, so to speak. Each level relates to a level above it. It could also be a source for the level below it. There's a continuation. There's a certain seder of what comes before, what comes after, and so on. There's one level that's limited enough that it's able to enter into the mitzias of the world. Then there's a level that's above that. It's above the limitations of the world. Then you have a level that's not only unable to enter b'pnimius into the mitzias of the world, but is totally removed, doesn't relate to the whole mitzias of the world at all. So there are various different levels. So the Rebbe in general is dividing this into 3 levels here, which usually it speaks about mamala kalalman, soiviv kalalman, and even soiviv kalalman relates to a mitzias of the world. And then there's giluyim that are totally removed, that you can't even refer to it as soiviv kalalman either. And durch der Avede von Yidden wird aufgetan a harchave v'chiddush, der marchiven, the harchave, that Yid broadens, and there's a new level that you reach to, as eich der Eir, was is nit begeder Eilemis klal. Even this level, that totally removed of Eilemis, bis eich der Eir, was is hecher, von dem Eir, shoye memala makam achala, lifnei atzimtzum. We're speaking here even about an Eir that's higher than that level that existed, as it's explained in the Sifrei Kabbalah. It's brought in the beginning of Samach Vav, when you get to the presence of the Eibusher that filled all the empty space before any tzimtzum. So l'chayre, that's the level that's totally removed of mitzias of the world. Vert nimshach lamata. So even a level that's above that revelation that was there, Mamala Makam Achalal, that's the level that you draw down, the new level that you can bring down Lamata through the Aveda in the Gashmis of the world. That's the concept of Chadash. So Chadash doesn't only apply to the Aveda itself. There's a few different aspects of Chadash that the Rebbe is explaining here. Chadash describes the Aveda. It's an Aveda b'derech Chiddush, to take the Yesh and make it into an Ayin. Chadash also applies to the person, the dagger that he reaches, Bein Areich, a completely new level that it elevates him to. And Chadash also refers to the Eibishter, to the level of Milo that we draw down here. Lo Yizbarach, we draw down the Eibishter himself higher than all of the levels of Giluyim that comes down dafka through this kind of Aveda. The Keli Tzuan in Yishal Chiddush. Now, how do you become a Keli for this kind of revelation? So as we had before, the Rebbe said there that there's levels of Elokus that are limited, that could enter into the world. There are levels that are above, levels that are even higher. But here we're talking about making a dira for the Eibishter, for the very essence of the Eibishter, here below, in the Gashmis of the world. So what's a Keli for that? Is there anything that could be a Keli for this that's totally unlimited here, Lamata? So the answer is, the Keli for this, so an initial Chiddush is bittul. The keli is the very fact that the Metzius is not here, that it's not about you. If there is no Metzius, that itself is the greatest keli for this revelation. This concept is also known regarding the different levels of aliyahs that there are when you go from one level to the next. As when the aliyah is be'ein areich, legabe de friedige madrege, if you're going from one level to the next, but you're not simply going from one level to a level above it, which is a continuation. That once you reach the shleimus of one level, it brings you to the next step. Like a person that's climbing stairs, that you can't go from the bottom of the stairs to the top. You go from one level and that brings you to the next step. But over here, we're talking about when a person is jumping and going from one level to another level that's totally unrelated to the level that he was on before. Musfar der aliyah zayin bittel. In order for you to go from this step to the next step, there has to be a bittel. You have to annul and completely negate what the level that you were on in order to be open for this new jump, for this new level that you're entering into. Then it's possible for you to go to this higher level. Al derech der inyan ha'omud unahar dinner. This is what it says, Lamaila in Gan Eden, that there's a pillar. There's many, many different levels of Gan Eden. When the neshama goes from Gan Eden Tachten to Gan Eden Elyon, so there's a pillar that the neshama has to climb to leave its previous place, and it also has to pass through a nahar dinur, a fiery river, in order to completely get rid of any level of any experience that it had in the previous Gan Eden. Was darf durchgehen b'shas misen oile von Gan Eden Tachten zu Gan Eden Elyon. So the point is, when you're climbing from one level to the next, and the new level is going to be based on, related to the previous level, so not only is the previous level not a contradiction to this new level that you're reaching to, adarabah, that's the foundation that will bring you to the next level, that helps you appreciate the higher level. But when you go from one level to the next, and you go to a new level that's totally a new experience, unassociated to whatever was before, if you're going to still keep the previous experience and everything that's associated with it, so those associations in your mind will not allow you to be open to this completely new experience. It's also brought over there in the Maimarim of Samach Vav, where the Rebbe is quoting from the famous story with Rab Zayda when he left from Bavel and he came to Eretz Yisrael. So he fasted 40 Tanesim, or maybe even 100 Tanesim, in order to forget all of his learning in the style of Talmud Bavli, in order to be open to accept a new way of learning of Talmud Yerushalmi. Because it's not just another level of understanding. It's a completely new approach, a completely new way of thinking that you have to completely drop your previous understanding. So that's what we're talking about over here. If we're drawing down a level of a chiddush, a totally new revelation that the world does not relate to, from the highest Eir, so the only keli for that is bittul, to completely negate your mitzias, to be open to something new to enter into you. Und das ist echt der Pnimis, der Geteichen von Makes. Now this brings us to a much deeper understanding of what the concept of the mitzvah of putting up these fences are. In the Gidare Musyagim, when a person creates these fences and these guards entering into the Gashmis of the world, the Make, which is what the fence over here represents, was Hayid stellt tuf ba'avedase, that a Yid constructs in his Avede, sagt sich heraus die Tnua from Bittul of Kabbalah soil. The Pnimius of this is really the Bittul of the Yid in the Kabbalah soil Malchus Shemayim. Was macht him farak Keli haruya zu bayis chadash, which makes him that Keli for this new revelation through this Bittul. In other words, the Rebbe is saying, earlier we learned the idea of these fences is as a guard, as a protection, because you're in the Gashmis of the world. So there's a danger that you may fall into the Gashmis of the world. So you have to create new fences that shouldn't happen. So it's a bavaranish because of the nefila. Here the Rebbe is saying, as the Rebbe will continue, it's not just a bavaranish of the nefila, but there's a much deeper thing. Putting up these fences, the chitzayni is, it's about guards and different things that you put up, not to be drawn into Elam Hazeh, but what's the pnimius of those fences? Hey, yes, you're so concerned about Ratzon Elyon, you don't want to chas v'shalom be over on Ratzon Elyon in the most minute detail, in the most slightest way, so therefore you're putting up these fences. So the background, the pnimius, what's really going on over here is a very deep sense of bittul and Kabbalah soil that you have. That's really the pnimius of this putting up these fences. It's that bittul and Kabbalah soil that makes you a keli for the new Eir Chadash that comes down in this kind of Aveda, Dafkin, the Gashmis of the world. So now the mitkem emazbezayin, the tam pnimi from them. So now we can understand on a deeper level also was to see him a pasuk. When the pasuk says that you have to put up these fences, and then it continues that there should not be any blood spilled in your house. When someone could fall, is al derech ha'aloche Nit nor an sinas tam of mitzvahs makkah. It's not only considered to be a continuation, a reason for the mitzvah of putting up a fence in order that no one should fall. Nor atzivi b'fnei atzmai. When it says later, ki yipol ha'noifel mimenu, that's a mitzvah for itself. The Rambam counts it as two separate mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of putting up a fence, and then there's another isser of leisasim damim v'visecha ki yipol ha'noifel mimenu. Wer steht in Sifri, was sisa makkah l'gagecha mitzvahs asay, and then v'leisasam damim b'veisecha, mitzvahs loisesa. That's a separate thing, it's a mitzvahs loisesa. Okay, and the Rabbi here brings in order 48, therefore we make a bracha on mitzvahs makkah. Part of the point is that we see that the mitzvah of makkah is a point for itself, not just to bavarin that no one should fall down. So what's the point there? Badarinyu from makkah. Based on what we learned, we understand that the point of putting up these fences is not a geder v'siyag tzibavaran and nefilas adam yipala neifel. The point is not only, as we said in the beginning, in Siv Gimel, because you're entering into a place of Gashmi, so you don't want to get drawn and fall down into the Gashmi. So therefore you have to put up these fences. That's not the point. It's not only the fences. Now it says, inyan hamuchrech in oivtan abayis chodosh. It's also something which is necessary for the Gilim Ulmaila, for the new bias, for the new revelation that's coming from above. The chiddush ve'ilu shalei be'erech in dem adam ulamayla kaviyachol. This new revelation that's being revealed to you in this aveda, and the new chiddush that's being accomplished lamayla, the makkah, the purpose of the makkah, the pnimi is the makkah is bittul. And that bittul creates a keli for this new gili that there is lamayla. That's the deeper pshat of the mitzvah of makkah. So you see over here the Rebbe's perspective on this concept of creating gedarim usyagim. There is the concept of creating gedarim usyagim kipshutai, and they're necessary taka. That a person has to have certain fences and certain things in order to bavaran himself, not to fall into things that a yid doesn't belong into. But the Rebbe is saying you could approach this from a deeper way. You don't have to come to it in a way that you feel like, ich bin abgefallen, ich bin a neufel, and therefore I have to take care of myself, to be concerned what's going to happen with me. You can come to it from a different place completely. You can come to it realizing that really the Aveda you're doing here in Gashmias is an Aveda of Chodosh. You're connecting to the essence of the Eibishter. There's a higher Gilimul Maila. So why do you need a Makkah? Makkah is the Keli. Makkah is the expression of your bittul for that greater revelation from above. Not that you're a neufel, fakat. You want to be a keli for this great bittul, for this great revelation that comes down on Maila. So therefore, the concern for Ratzon Elyon, the Makkah that you create, which is the concern and the connection, the bittul that you have to Ratzon Elyon, that's what the point of the Makkah here is. It's completely different approach. So the lesson we take of this to apply practically. Men dar wissen, one has to know, as men tar sich nicht abschließen vom Welt, that you can't lock yourself off from what's happening here in this world. Nor men muss bayen abayis machen adire lo yisbarach b'tachteinu. One has to enter into the world Gashmias, interact with the Gashmias of the world, and build a dwelling for the Eibishter in the lowest place of the world. That's this mitzvah of kisivne bayis chodesh. That's our aveda. V'adarabe, durch der yiride in dem oifne aveda, it's when a person does this aveda, dafke in the Gashmias of the world, this brings the true elevation. Both a chiddush for the person, that he gets connected to a level be'ein areich, and also l'mayla. It brings an aliyah be'ein areich. That's on one hand, that a person has to know that kisivne bayis chadash is letting us know where and what our aveda consists of. However, at the same time, on the other hand, one has to know, in order to succeed in transforming the physical to become a keli for ruchnius, you must have fences. What it simply means is, as bleibt ba'avdala from Gashmias olam. Even while you are in the Gashmias of the world, in essence, you remain separated of the Gashmias. The Havdalah we're speaking about over here is not to walk away from the world. You are in the world. Aber it doesn't take up any place in your life. It's not something that grabs you. It's not something that you're involved in. You're not interested in the Gashmias itself. So you're there, but you're not really present there in the sense that this is not your reality, that the Gashmias itself is what you're interested in. Weil weiß und feels, because he knows and feels constantly, as ein ganzes Askos mit in Yonei Olam is nur durch die Eis zu ausführen, die Kavane al Yene zu machen, adirele is barach betachteinem. The only reason you're here, and the only reason you're occupied and are interacting with the Gashmis of the world is only for the purpose because you're creating a dira for the Eibishter. So you're not really there. When a person is in a place and he's mission driven and he's constantly thinking about the purpose of what he's doing here, so the reality of that location, of the place that you're in, never really exists in your mind. You're not here because this is important to me. You're here with a mission. So therefore you could be there fully and yet not really present, not really connected to the reality of Olam Hazeh at the same time. From them is a Hiram, Yechedes, Fadi, was gereiten sich zu Tivne Bayis Chodosh in dem Sinn von Chayin Nisuin. And from here we also have a very special and important lesson for those that are preparing to build a new home in the sense of getting married. So first of all, the Rebbe says, Men zet de fun den Geudel inyan von Chayin Nisuin. We see over here the importance of this stage of life when a person comes and gets married. Nisuin von jeden Yidden, the marriage of every individual Yid, is an inyan klali, is something which is very important and very general. Nit nur farim. It's not only for his own life, of course, a tremendous step in your life when you get married. In seine chayim apratim, in your personal life. The accomplishment of every individual getting married brings a tremendous chiddush l'mayla by the Eibishter as well. Wie bald, das Dämmel teubt sich an, sein Iker Avede zu machen, adire lo yizbarach b'tachteinem. This is the time in your life where you begin a new stage and you begin creating a dwelling for the Eibishter himself, lo yizbarach. To tesuf der marchiven daite shalodam de l'mayla kaviyachol. You're broadening above a hamshachas erchadesh canal, drawing down from a completely new level higher than anything that existed there. So that's the importance of the step that a person is taking in getting married, the tremendous accomplishment for the whole Seder Shtalshelus, lo yizbarach. Leidach darf no bewissen. On the other hand, a person has to know, as der Weg zu aufbauen der Bayis Chodosh, muss haben der Machana Make. The proper way of how to build a new home is to build a fence. On them in naye gedorim v'siyagim. To take upon yourself new fences to make sure that the home will be a proper home that it's supposed to be. Seemingly a person might think to himself, since it says that a chassan on the day of his chasana, the Eibishter forgives him for all of his sins. Is nit as a neitig zu bewahren sich mit gedarim v'siyagim v'cholu. So he may think that it's not so important for him to create all of these fences and so on. Warum? Seine friedige in Yonim Leitayvim sind doch abgewischt geworden. Whatever negative he had in his life until this day, it's all been wiped away. It's all the Eibishter's Meichel, and he's like a new person when he gets married. So he has everything perfect. The Eibishter now is making him a new person, and therefore he has all the kayach to go into this new phase of life, and he doesn't need any additional gedarim yagim. Zogt min him, so therefore the pasuk here is saying adarabah. No, the opposite is true. Not only is it necessary for a person to be warned about the future, as we explained, that even if you're totally clean until today, but you're entering into a new phase. What happens when you're going to enter into the Gashmis of the world? So now you're a neifel in this new stage. This itself brings with it new risks and new dangers. Not only that, but also Val Mitzad Dinit Regilus. So this is all regarding the future here. Val Mitzad Dinit Regilus and der Aveda. And Olam Hazeh. Kein chas v'sholem verin der yipol ha-neifel kanal Siv Gimel. So the point that we said earlier in the Sikha, in Siv Gimel, that you're entering into a new phase, you're not accustomed to any of this. So the Gashmis of the world may shake you up completely and may change things, and therefore you may fall into it. No nachme, it actually goes even a step further. As dav zayin di makeh oich tzeliv zayne inyanim le'toivim ba'avar. You actually need a fence also because of the fact that you may have certain not good things in you from the past that you are carrying with you into the Gashmis of the world that will also cause to drag you down. That could disturb this new phase of life of building a new home. Why is that the case? Even though the Eibishter forgave you everything, because since over here in this new phase of life, you're being elevated to a level that's totally incomparable to anything that you were on before. Is nit maspik die friedige tshuva. So over here, the tshuva that you've done previously for things that happened in your life before this new phase is insufficient. Not as dav zayna hecheret tshuva. When a person goes to a higher level, so what happens is, whatever level of tshuva you were capable of doing before, is insufficient to the higher level that you're on. On this higher level, there's a deeper level of tshuva that's demanded of you for those things that you have to do tshuva for. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya Perik Chavtes, every new level you realize to a more subtle degree that there's a deeper level of tshuva that you have to do, and therefore the things of the past are still there dragging you down. On this new level of this Bayis Chodesh, when a person enters into this new phase of life, Adarabah, so you have to add and enhance and bring new Gedarim Misyagim to elevate yourself to a higher level. And this is also true regarding the concept of this fence that we spoke about earlier, the Havdalah from Olam Hazeh, this idea that a person has to separate himself from the world. A person can claim and say, since now this is what the new phase of life demands of me. The mill on my neck, in other words, the very full weight and heaviness of Olam Hazeh, Teitze knows that that's what it is, and Teitze demands me to be here with the full involvement of Olam Hazeh. How do you demand of a person while you're telling him that he has to enter into Olam Hazeh with the full weight, totally interacting with Olam Hazeh, at the same time you're telling him, create a makkah, to be separated from Olam Hazeh? So what one has to know is as follows. As Adarabah, on the contrary, the tachlis von Nisuei ish v'isha lamata is the purpose and the ultimate goal of marriage of man and woman here below. What is that? That they should merit and that they should have the third partner, the Eibusher, should dwell amongst them. Das soll bringen zu der Bayis Chodesh, which is Nisuei ish v'isha and ruchnies zwischen Yidden mit den Eibushen. The marriage of husband and wife here below is in order to bring about the ultimate marriage of Yidden that are compared to an Isha, and the Eibusher, which is compared to the husband, to the Ish, to bring about that connection, that marriage. And the only way that that's possible was in dem and dot zwei yonim. So for this marriage to take place, there are 2 points that are necessary. Aleph, the kiddushin zwischen Yidden mit den Eibushen. There's the kiddushin, the marriage between Yidden and the Eibusher. Das heißt, das was Yidden sind miyuchad mit der Lakus. The fact that we're able to bring together the union, the connection between Yidden and the Eibusher. That's on one hand. And Beis, das was durch dem is Oster la akule alme kehektish. The term kiddushin means to be sanctified, to separate everything else, that it becomes forbidden, that the wife is now designated just for the husband, and she's forbidden to have a relation with anyone else. So an integral part of marriage is the kedusha, the separation from anything else that goes on in the world. So that's also an integral part of our Aveda as well. As we said before, sein Ganze ist Askos mit Inyane Ya'ilam. True, he has to be in the world. Yes, with the full weight Arayin in Olam Hazeh, but at the same time, though, why? Why is he there in Olam Hazeh? Is nar l'sagel l'bayla. It's all just to gather, to bring for the husband. This is the lashon that it says in the Medrash, where it says that Yidden are compared, the Aveda that they do is compared to what a bee does. The worker bee gathers, she goes to the flowers and gathers the pollen, the whatever it brings from the flowers, and it brings it to the colony, or just not for its own sake. It brings it for everyone else. L'saga l'bayla, for the queen bee, that's what the worker bee does. So the same thing also, the nimshal, a yid, is here in Olam Hazeh. The entire Aveda that he does in Olam Hazeh, the entire hisaskos, it's a real hisaskos. But nevertheless, only l'saga l'bayla. So you're always focused. You're in essence separated from the actual Gashmis of Olam Hazeh. So Oisfir in the Kavana al Yena, Yid is only here to fulfill the Eibishter's purpose from Machen Adir Le'Yizbarach B'Tachtainim, to create a dwelling for the Eibishter here below in this world.